מודה אני לפניך מלך חי וקיים. מודה אני לפניך מלך חי וקיים. שהחזרת בי נשמתי חמלה רבה אמונתך. שהחזרת בי נשמתי וחמלה רבה אמונתך. There's a story told about philosopher Martin Buber. Buber was drawn to mystical ideas and practice. Much of his life was spent studying and documenting the Hasidic masters and their tales. And Buber himself would frequently engage in mystical meditation. One day, just before World War I, a young man came to visit Buber who had been engaged in deep meditative practice all morning. Buber listened to the young man, was friendly and attentive, answering his stated questions. But he didn't pay close attention to the young man, not really, and missed the entire subtext of his query. As Buber described it, after a morning of ecstatic meditation, he was present in body but not in spirit. Sometime after, the young man was killed on the front, and Buber learned after the fact that the man had come to him seeking and not receiving guidance during an existential crisis. Buber was devastated. Not long after, he wrote his seminal work, I and Thou. In it, Buber outlines a methodology of presence, a plea for real and authentic human engagement. Buber was concerned, on one hand, that people too often objectify their fellow, reducing family, friends, and strangers alike to an it instead of a thou. On the other hand, Buber was well aware that people can sometimes be too focused on the ethereal or their own personal intellectual or spiritual pursuits and risk missing crucial human moments. This he learned the hard way because of that fateful interaction with a seeking student, the regret from which fueled his life's work. On Yom Kippur, we often focus on regret, and that's important. Regret can be a powerful motivator for change, but tshuva, and through tshuva, or it leads rather to tshuva, and through tshuva to righteous living. But today I want to emphasize not regret, but how to change our behavior to avoid more of those regretful moments. It's no chiddush, it's fairly obvious that deep human encounters are critically important, particularly in our too often isolated lives. But how do we get there? How do we achieve those encounters? Aside from saying to ourselves, I need to be more present, and then getting distracted by another tweet or a headline or annoyance of daily living, and then beating ourselves up for our latest failure, is there something we can do? Prophylactically, is there a methodology, a practice through which we can increase our interpersonal batting average? In fact, there is. Gratitude. There's all kinds of research that shows that people who practice gratitude intentionally and consistently feel more joy and pleasure, have more energy for daily living. And these people are also kinder, they're more helpful, more generous, more compassionate, they're slower to anger and quicker to forgive. People who practice gratitude also feel less lonely and isolated. And check this out, they sleep better and feel more refreshed upon waking. Statistically, they have lower blood pressure and fewer aches and pains. By just about every measure, on the whole, people who express gratitude on a regular basis lead better lives. You may know Heschel's famous line, "It is gratefulness that makes the soul great." But what he means is that we must cultivate a sense of wonder, of surprise, of what he calls radical amazement. Jewish prayer, teaches Heschel, is a curriculum for wonder and gratitude. Think about the first thoughts that go through your mind when you wake up in the morning. How many of us immediately start to worry about our day? How many of us ask, what terrible thing happened in the country or in Israel while I slept? How many of us start our day by thinking, I wish I could just crawl back into bed because the thought of tackling the task list is just too daunting? It's been said worry is a waste of imagination. This is exactly why our tradition would have us begin our day not with our devices, with worry and anxiety, but with a prayer of gratitude. What do we say in the morning? Well, if you have your High Holy Day program, take a look. It's on page 20. There actually isn't a page 20. But it's two pages before page 22. It's sort of toward the middle. And you'll see there on this page, Modeh or Moda ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. I am grateful before you, living and eternal God. Shechazarta bi nishmati bechemla rabba unatecha. For your kindness in restoring my soul, how great is your confidence. The poet Emmy Carpenter offers the following rendition in what she calls the crescendo of morning. Modeh ani, I give thanks for quiet, even breaths during the crescendo of morning. I steady myself as unfulfilled tasks are whispered, then yelled outside and inside my chest. I inhale and exhale. I remember the renewal of soul and ancient covenant. Written in sand, stone, struggle, and guided by 4.5 billion years of echoes from rock weathered by rain and sun. I will rejoice in the fragments and exposed cores, and standing on the ruins, I will sense the swelled springs flowing beneath the rocks that Moses struck. I will greet today with memories of lightning and thunder, flashes and rumbles of turmoil and yearning. I will offer my soul to the crescendo, Modeh ani, I give thanks. Let's take a moment to look at the words of the traditional prayer itself, because I think, like so many of our prayers, it's frequently misunderstood. Modeh ani, I am grateful before you, living and eternal sovereign. Now, at first blush, you might think this prayer is really only about God's greatness. One could imagine climbing bleary-eyed out of bed, throwing on a bathrobe, and stumbling before God's throne. Oh, mighty King who is so great, I am so small. And that sense of diminishment is supposed to make us feel more grateful. But that doesn't work, does it? Feeling small doesn't instill us with a sense of wonder. It usually fills us with resentment, sometimes with self-loathing. The problem is that we often confuse humility with diminishment. True humility is not about feeling small. It's about feeling huge. It's about finding our place in the greater whole. We are humble when we appreciate the vastness of the universe. Staring at the night sky and contemplating the inconceivable distance between the stars, or watching the sun just peek out on that distant horizon. Humility is when we lose the race and then marvel at the power or grace of the one who bested us. Writer David Brooks calls humility radical self-awareness from a distance. When we say, Modeh ani, we lean into our day with a sense of purpose. In fact, I would suggest that we not translate the line, I am grateful, which means I have gratitude, but grateful I am. That is, I am gratitude. Allow me to start my morning filled with, defined with my gratitude or by my gratitude. And then we say lefanecha, Melech chai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati bechemla. I am this person of gratitude, standing before you, the one who animates me each morning, not because you are great and I am small, but because my existence is great and wondrous, and realizing that helps me feel less small. Earlier this morning, in our Shacharit service, in a hymn we also say on Shabbat, we chanted the words, Ilu finu malei shirak kayam. Were our mouths to fill with song as the sea, our tongues sing endlessly like waves, our lips offer praise like limitless sky, our eyes shine like the sun and the moon, our arms spread heavenward like eagle's wings, and our feet run as fast as deer, we would still be unable to fully express our gratitude to you. One more thing about Modeh Ani, our morning attitude of gratitude prayer. I think there's a secret message embedded in it, particularly if you think about the use of the word lefanecha. We translate this before you, but it literally means before your face. I want to say a word about faces in general, and then we can tackle what I think it means to experience God's face. First, think about your own face. Maybe you like your face. Maybe you don't. But no matter how you think you feel about your face, you've never actually seen it. Consider this. How do we typically see our faces? In the mirror, of course. We look at our reflection and we consider and probably too often judge what we see. But when you look in the mirror, that's not your face. It's a reflection, which means what you've come to know as your left eye is actually your right. When you notice one ear is lower than the other, that's actually the other ear. Your smile is not your smile, at least not the one that you see in the bathroom after brushing your teeth. What about photographs? Frederick Douglass became one of the most photographed people in his era because he felt this revolutionary technology was more likely to capture the truth of how his face looked, unlike the two readily available caricatures of black men. But those early images, while surely more accurate than racist cartoons, were still images, not the real thing. Even today's high-res technology provides only an approximation of our face. Alexandra Kleeman, winner of the Bard Fiction Prize, points out that not just photos, but mirrors too, are a relatively modern convenience. Until recently, she writes, mirrors were luxury items, fragile and expensive to produce, owned only by the aristocratic and the wealthy. Who could have imagined that reflective surfaces would become so ubiquitous? She talks about beginning her day not with Modeh Ani, but by looking in the bathroom mirror. But she bemoans, even if she didn't want to do so, it would be nearly impossible to avoid. If not the bathroom, it's the rear view mirror or a plate glass window or the inside of an elevator. Your own face runs rampant throughout the world, Kleeman writes, and like a word repeated too many times begins to lose its reference. Rather than reveal to us to ourselves as we are, mirrors show the many different ways we might be and press us to choose from among them the image we want to project to the world. So, if it's literally impossible to see our own face, the only way for our face to be seen is what? Through the eyes of another. Think about that for a moment. What a powerful notion, that we can see others and they can see us, but not we us nor they them. Perhaps that's why Shammai says we should greet each person with sever panim yafot, with a beautiful expression on our face, meaning grateful to see them and in a manner that makes them feel grateful to be seen. Kleeman writes, before there was any such thing as a mirror, human beings were still self-aware, possessed of an individualized sense of self. The only real difference, perhaps, was the degree to which we relied on others to view us. Because we could not witness ourselves except with difficulty in pools of water, we needed others to see us to make us visible. But truth be told, aren't human senses, including sight, limited in their perception too? Light is refracted through a lens. Electric signals are sent to the brain. There is no demonstrable, objective truth about our face. Perhaps this is why Panim is only one of a handful of words in the Hebrew language that uses the plural form to refer to something singular. Can you think of some others? Mayim, water. Shamayim, sky. Chayim, life. Some suggest Panim, like those others, isn't really singular because each is constantly changing. Think about that. Can you imagine one sky? One unique image of water? Life as a singular phenomenon? And now try to think of a face, any human face, even if you narrow it down to one face that you know quite well, that of your lover or your sister or your son or your rabbi. Do any of us have just one face? Until recently, you couldn't even see my face. And when we removed the beard, there were people who said, "Oh, I remember you," and there are people who said, "Your face looks all wrong." Try something with me, if you would. Turn to the person next to you. Look at their face. Now, my cousin, the psychologist Arthur, keep looking. The psychologist Arthur Aaron says that if you do this for long enough, you can fall in love, so be careful. But look closely. What do you see? Is it one thing? Or do you see complexity, multiplicity, fluidity like ocean or sky or life itself? Okay, you can look back here. Now, who among us felt a little uncomfortable with that exercise? Maybe a little? And there's a reason for that. Because seeing, really seeing and being seen can be exhilarating and also terrifying. That's how vulnerability works. If done right, vulnerability begets vulnerability. That's why I stood before you last Yom Kippur to speak candidly with you about my experience of depression and my Tourette syndrome. I wanted to model vulnerability in the hope that we could be panim el panim, that it would invite you to share more with me and with each other. And I'm happy to say that happened. Allow me to practice gratitude with you for a moment. I am so grateful for each of you who contacted me, so many of you who reached out with your appreciation for that risky sermon, but more importantly, with your own stories, your own struggles, your own triumphs. I won't share any here because most were shared in confidence, but I will say that a priority of mine is that our return to Utah Place will include in the coming months and years a renewed and more robust focus on chesed and congregant-to-congregant care at Betham. To see, really see human faces, each other's faces, is a great gift. But I mentioned we'd get to discussing gratitude and God's face. Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Grateful I am before your face, eternal sovereign. Why did Buber write I and thou? Because he noticed that we humans tend to focus on the wrong things. We create binaries, physical or metaphysical, human or divine, and then inevitably we worship the wrong things. Either we withdraw from the material world, as Buber himself did when he overlooked that young man's angst, or more often we put our trust only in the physical, what we can see and touch. That's why Torah is so hung up on graven images, on idolatry, and also while we should surely be grateful for ourselves, we must be careful to not direct our gratitude toward ourselves. which is why one is not allowed to daven in front of a mirror. Halachically speaking, that's the case, because we might get confused. But we are encouraged to daven where? In a minyan, because there you can see other faces. Buber breaks the binary. He says there is a thou within each human being, and we can experience that expansive, infinite thou when we really pay attention to someone else. Emmanuel Levinas, a younger contemporary of Buber's, points out that the most vulnerable and expressive act of someone's presence is in fact their face. Another way of putting this is that in each other's faces we see God's. Because who among us believes God has an actual face, a human face? It's a metaphor, of course. This is why Heschel recommends prayer for gratitude practice, because it means that we point our gratitude in the right direction, not at objects, not at ourselves, not past another, nor at her. Rather, by truly seeing someone, we express gratefulness to them, for them, by seeing through them to something that unites us both in a great oneness. Gratitude is both the cause and the result of the I-thou encounter. In Hebrew, we may say not panim el panim, face to face, but panim el panim. In the best, truly interpersonal moments, the kind to which Buber and Levinas aspire, we go from panim, the external face, to panim, the internal life. The Torah tells us that we were created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. What is the image of God? Heschel says it is the infinite complexity and plurality of the human face. And that's also, I believe, why God tells Moshe on Mount Sinai that none can see the divine face and live, because God's face is to be seen not on mountaintops, but in the crowd here in synagogue, sitting next to you in the classroom of university, in the eyes of the barista at Starbucks, and through windows past the reflection in the face of every human other. It's not that you die if you see God's face, it's that when you realize you can see God's face, or where you can really see God's face, only then can you begin to really live. Prayer, as a gratitude practice, is a powerful tool for wholehearted living. And for some, daily services, Shabbat services, Yom Kippur or Sukkot services provide the language that we need. But that doesn't work for everyone. I get that. For many of us, these longer services are daunting, overwhelming. Maybe we don't know the language. Maybe they're difficult to access. So I want to invite you to grab hold of one line. This one line, the one that's here on page 20, 2 pages before 22, in your program. In fact, take the program home with you. Put it by your bedside. It'll remind you of all the great events happening at Beth Am Synagogue. But also, you could turn to page 20, 2 pages before 22, and there you can read it in the morning. Make it a daily practice. Modeh, moda ani lefanecha. Each morning when you open your eyes, before you do anything else, try to say that one line of Hebrew, and then see how the faces in your life become not mirrors, but windows to better living. Modeh ani. Grateful I am for each of your faces, for the ability to see and be seen, for the capacity to express gratitude more, so we can be better and bigger and avoid having to do additional tshuva. On this Day of Atonement, consider the origin of that word, at one mint. Really, that's where it comes from. We repair relationships because we wish to be in harmony with one another, and our discovery of the other in the true exploration of their face, in the uniqueness of each panim, and the infinite possibilities of every panim, points to the oneness, the uniqueness, in the expansiveness of God. And God's oneness then points us back to the faces that surround us. And so, my friends, the journey continues. Shana Tova, Gomar Chatima Tova. May we all finish with a good inscription this year.